What's going on, everybody? This is Cody from Motorcycle MD. I want to first apologize to you guys. I have lost my microphone and my audio sounds like junk. No idea where it's at. Nothing new. But anyways, this video we'll be talking about floats, carburetor floats. Alright, setting float height, what to look for in the float valve system, how it operates, and just how to adjust it using a certain tool, because this is crucial for your intake of the fuel inside each jet. Alright, if you do it wrong, you can experience a lot of problems. I've been hearing a lot of people talk about float heights lately, so I just want to cover it with a quick video, quick blog, because I haven't done anything in a while, and I'm working on something that I can't wait to show you guys. I'll have more information about that at the end. But float height, float level adjustments and stuff like that, and what to look for and what you may run into. Alright, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first things that you're going to need to do is get a float level gauge. Alright, these are crucial. You can't really do a float level height adjustment without one of these, okay? Someone probably does some bench style adjustment that I don't trust, and you can research that if you want, but if you do it correctly, you need a float level gauge. Alright, and some may be different. Mine reads on the inside. I've heard of ones that read on the outside as well. Regardless, it does the same thing. You will find out that every bike has a float level spec, alright, what it should be at, the height, the level, all that stuff. Every bike that has a carburetor will have one. I don't care what brand it is. So, as well as a small flathead screwdriver or whatever you want to use to make your adjustment on the tang of the float. So, a float can look like many different things, but this is usually the most common. It's a plastic style. This is actually a non-adjustable, and you will know that because everything is plastic. Alright, you can't really bend plastic. You can if you heated it up, but I wouldn't do that. You may see ones like these. These are more common in like generators, lawnmowers, smaller motor style stuff. A little O with a non-adjustable float. Another non-adjustable here, plastic with a rounded edge. Some of the older vintage stuff, you may find them that they're even brass. These are very problematic, but they're really cool. I love these style, but they just don't last very long, and I'll tell you guys why. And you may find ones like these, which is what we will be basing our adjustments off of. They have a metal tang that is adjustable. Another one you may find is something like this. Okay, black style. It's still an adjustable system because it has metal parts to the top of it where you can adjust that float height. And you will have your float needles. Okay, they'll look like this. Some will have a little hanger on top. They'll have a little plunger up top maybe. Maybe yours does not plunge in. That's okay. Some styles are not meant to do that. This is off of an older bike. It has no hanger, but it still has that piston right at the top. Okay, that functions. Okay, so your float needle's job is to take its pointed end and plug up a hole that allows fuel to flow into the carburetor. So the float will go inside of its float seat, which is right there, that little brass piece. When it goes inside of there, that little rubber end or metal end, whatever, is supposed to close off that passage when fuel is coming into the carb. So as you have your bowl on the bottom of your carb, like this, and fuel starts to flow into it and fill up this float bowl, your float is designed to, let's say that this is an empty carburetor right here. Your float is, as it fills up, it's supposed to slowly rock its way back in and cut off fuel into the carb so it doesn't overflow, go inside of the intake of the carburetor and flood the engine, fill the gas up with oil, fill the airbox up with oil. I've even seen it can get pretty crazy if those malfunction. Alright, so those are some of the different styles, but that's its job. Alright, there's some things you want to look for with your float needles is on the rubber tip. If you start to see a little ring around it, usually because it's been worn in, and the hole that it sits in puts this nice little ring seat around it. Some of them I've seen work fine, some of them causes the float valve to operate incorrectly. Alright, it will allow too much fuel in, or it will get stuck. Okay, so what you also want to look for is to make sure that that top plunger is working on your float. Make sure that if you just clean your carburetor, get some steel wool and clean up the sides of that float, okay, because that's going to sit right down inside of this brass piece nice and smooth, and there should be no resistance or interruption as it makes its way in and out of that float seat. What I like to do also to clean up the float seat is take a piece of steel wool and turn it into a little ball, a real stiff ball, and shove it down inside of there. You can use your flathead screwdriver and make sure it's smaller than the hole there, obviously, and you can spin this and work that steel wool inside of there to polish it up brand new. I do it all the time. Some of these are removable, some of these are not. This one is removable because you can see it has a 10mm removable plug that you can just take right out. Some are not, so don't try to remove them. You'll damage the carb. Your float level gauge is designed to make its adjustment or give you a reading of the float in its resting position. Alright, so if we take our carburetor and we can kind of rock this float back and forth, what you want to do is rock the carb forward. Okay, so this is its forwardmost position, as if there's no gas inside of the float. There's no gas in it. That's the position we want it at. Then we want to slowly rock the carburetors backwards until it lightly seats that float inside of the float seat. Okay, so you're going to rock this nice and slow back until it stops. That is where you check your float level. Okay, for this one I believe this is off of a VT1100. I believe it's 18.2, something weird like that. Let me see. Way off. 9.2. I added a 1, so it's 9.2. So on my float level gauge, I'm gonna go to that. Obviously, it goes in increments of 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all the way up to 45mm actually. And it says 9.2. So I'm gonna bring this. Obviously, mine does not read in points, in tenths. So I'm gonna go right to the 9 and just go a little bit past it. That's all I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna take my carburetor, rock it forward, slowly rock it back until it stays right there. And take my float gauge. I'm gonna slide this back and forth over top of it there. So with it like this, I'm gonna see how close this float gets to that arm there. It should just lightly be grazing the top of it. Alright, and you can check it multiple times. You should. And it should just be barely touching it, almost pressing it in slightly. Okay? Now if you take it from here and go flat bottom like this, the pressure of the float can actually give you a false reading, because remember that little plunger on top of the float, this can actually push that down. See how this kind of bounces on it, but in its lowest position it can give you a false reading. Look how high that is off of the float, but that's not the correct reading. The correct reading would be right there. See that's almost, that is perfect to me. I almost want to push it down just a slight bit, but you can check it on this side, and you can flip this if you want and check it on the other side. If I go down all the way, let me give you a bad reading all day long. Keep that in mind, guys. That is so crucial to your float levels. You will get a extremely rich mixture if that happens and you are testing it like that, because you got to think all of these jets are sitting there like little straws. You got fuel flowing all the way up into here, and if you set that float height too high to where that float's sitting way up in here, all of this is going to be way too rich. They're in the gas far too much. Because let's say my gas level is going to be here. If I increase that to all the way up in there, it'd be bad. It would not run right. I guarantee it. Alright, so you can test this with adjustable style and non-adjustable style. If it's non-adjustable, you gotta just replace it. Replace this and replace the float needle. That's just the way it is. I mean, you may be able to heat this thing up and bend them in a little bit and see if it works great. If it does, fantastic. I would just replace it. Alright, so to adjust that, let's say it's off, okay, that tang, that's like a little diving board, I guess would be the best way to put it. You can bend that up and you can bend it down. Bending it down would raise the float, bending it up would allow that float to sit in more. That makes sense? So that's adjusting it. Alright, you can make sure you after every adjustment you're checking it over and over again to make sure it's perfect. Okay, don't set it flat horizontal like that. And it's the same way no matter if you have 4 carbs, 6 carbs all on a line, it doesn't matter. These floats are stuck. This is old, baby. This is like been sitting in the back probably for like at least 15 years. So that float's garbage, but these are somewhat working right. But you do the same thing. You're gonna rock this forward, rock it slightly back, check it. Rock it forward, rock it slightly back, and check it. And each one of these should be on their own parallel, alright? Now if your float, if you're doing this check and you're finding that your float and you rock it back is just staying just like that and won't even go down, that's a problem. Okay, it's not just a one-time deal where it did that. It's going to do that when you go and put it on the bike and your motor's going to flood because it's getting stuck in there. Something is not clean. It can even be the rod, this rod right here that float rocks on. That needs to be polished as well, because if that has crud all over it from sitting, this can be hung up because of that. Clean the float seat, clean the rod that holds the float itself. All that has to be polished perfectly clean for it to work properly. Okay, so that's something that you should watch out for. If you rock it down and it sticks down, and you kind of put it like this, and it still doesn't go down, you still have a problem. Check it out, clean it, get it done. All right, guys. I hope that makes a lot of sense to you. Now, as far as these brass floats go, you gotta be really careful with these because these develop pinholes over time. They're beautifully crafted. I love the way that they look, but they're problematic. Okay. What happens is these, wherever they solder this brass together, it will develop a pinhole and it will literally fill up with gas. I've seen it. I'd say 8 out of 10 carburetors I've opened up with brass floats that have been sitting for a long period of time. I always check these, and it's as simple as taking the rod out and just shaking it by your head. And it's not like there's a bunch of water in it. Guarantee you there's probably a hole in it somewhere. What happens is that now this float has developed weight, and that weight will allow it to sink into the gas. It will not give you a correct reading. It will not float on top of that gas like it should. It will just sink right down inside of it because now there's weight to it. That's something that you have to check with these brass floats, okay? If you want, you can try to resolder it. I'm not good with brass soldering. This one actually has a crack in it right there. I'm not sure if you can actually see that. But if I were to sink this into gas, bubbles will come out, it would fill up. So that's something you want to watch out for on those older style floats. If you can go to a plastic float, that's perfect. They last a long time. Some of them are solid, some of them are hollow. This one's hollow, those black ones are solid though. So those are great, they'll last forever. These ones can also develop holes. I've never actually seen it, but it's hollow, so why wouldn't it? So that's it, guys. I'll make sure to put a link down for this float level gauge in the bottom. They're great to have, they're not too expensive either. You can show your buddies how to use it, and it'll make sure that your floats are precise according to the spec in the manual. And all the specs are different. Some may be 18 millimeters, some may be 4 millimeters. Just make sure that you check your manual. Don't just Google it, because K1, K2, K3, K4, K5, 750s, a lot of them are different. Alright, so don't just take the word for it, try to get a manual, or you can just ask me, and I'll be happy to show you. As long as it's a Honda, I can dig up some information for you. Now, before we end this, I'm gonna bring these carbs back out. Okay, I'm doing actually an experiment with some different cleaners. Okay, it's almost gonna be like a product review in a way. Okay, I'm gonna use these carbs. These have been sitting for a very long time. I'm gonna pull all the stuff out of it. I'm gonna let them sit into 4 different types of cleaners. Okay, we're gonna see which one works the best. I'm gonna use Seafoam. I'm gonna use some other different ones like Omega Cleaner, maybe K100, maybe Chem Dip. I haven't really decided fully, but that's what I've been working on lately for you guys. We're gonna let them sit in there. We're gonna see which one does the most help for as far as cleaning the jets out. I'm gonna use the same year jets. All of them are just as nasty as the one beside it. We're also gonna put them in some rubber, and let's see which one is more harmful to the rubber. Okay, so I'm really excited about that because I want to put some stuff to rest and see which one's the best one to use, whether you're putting stuff inside your tank to allow it to flush it out and clean the carburetors up, or what you're doing is worthless. I don't know. I'm not gonna be prideful about it because I'm excited to learn and see which one does the best. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching this. I hope it was really helpful. If you have any questions, please just shoot me a comment, email me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Make sure you subscribe to the mailing list, okay? Because you want to get the notice when that jank comes out. Alright, you don't want to miss it. So make sure you subscribe. Okay, you won't miss it. I won't spam you, I guarantee it. I will always just be sending you stuff that is useful. Whether you want to learn or you don't, it will always be useful for your motorcycles. Okay? Cody from Motorcycle MD, giving you quality professional tips, tricks,